Hello, everyone. It's Jennie and Laurie of Astropath, and today we are here to talk about the incredibly important movement of Uranus into Gemini, which happens on July 7th. So that's our topic. We're going to also cover how it impacts everybody by their rising sign. You can also watch the one for your sun sign. That will give you information as well. And before we dive into that, like us, follow us, do all the things, help us grow this channel. And also, just to remind you, Jennie and I are starting our own YouTube channels. We'll get more into that later. But for now, here you are with both of us. This channel will continue. Okay. So we're not going anywhere. We're just starting our own pieces on the side as well. Anything else you want to say, Jennie, before we dive into the conversation?
Yeah, I just want to say that I've put up my new class schedule on my website. So
Mm.
if you're interested in classes, you can start looking at what I'm going to be offering later this fall. So you can go to my website for that. And yeah, I just wanted to let people know about that. And like Lori said, we are working on our YouTube channel. So you'll be seeing more about that. And we'll post links for all this stuff below. So
Yeah. And for consultations, contact either one of us. And if you're learning astrology, don't forget my book, How to Read and Interpret a Birth Chart. That just came out this year. So it's a great book for people that are learning natal astrology. So on we go. Let's talk about Uranus moving into Gemini.
Well, let's start out by talking what Uranus even is. Let's just do a little breakdown of that. I mean, in a nutshell, Uranus is the great awakener. Uranus is the planet we look to when we're thinking about big, sudden change, when we're talking about things like, you know, freedom and rebellion and, revolutionary forces and breakthroughs and breakdowns. So these are just some of the things that you can think about. It has a very kind of reformative aspect to it. And I think in a lot of ways, it's just simply that principle of the one thing you can really rely on in life is change. And
Mhm.
that is very neatly summarized by Uranus. So,
Yeah. I love Uranus. Uranus, I love Uranus. Some people really struggle with Uranus transits, and some people really enjoy them. And I think it really depends a lot on the makeup of your own individual chart. It's really difficult to manage the kind of change that Uranus can bring if you're not, just a person who really enjoys major change. So, yeah, you can think of things like expect the unexpected. And I always think of, just these ideas of Uranus is like you put your fingers in a light socket and everything changes in a moment, or, you see something, you can't unsee it. When Uranus brings an idea to your mind, and with it being in Gemini, it will be bringing these ideas into your mind. Those ideas, you can't tuck them back into a package and pretend you didn't know that they occurred. Yeah, Uranus is the great awakener. And, you can also think of two sides of the coin of Uranus, one being the excitement and one being anxiety. And I think that oftentimes, if we really think about it, and we find ourselves in the middle of a big change that Uranus is bringing, we can have a certain amount of control over whether we engage with the excitement side of it or the anxiety side. So if you are experiencing a lot of anxiety as this movement happens, if your mind is just overly, anxious and worked up, really try to find that flip side, that side that can allow you to get excited about the changes that are coming, even if they're not what you expected or wanted.
yeah, I'm glad you brought up that thing between the anxiety and the excitement because I was thinking about this, like, what does this mean from a wellness perspective? What does it mean for Uranus to move somewhere in our personal natal charts? And essentially, it is that idea of it is bringing something that has to do with change, and that can be very uncomfortable. On a certain level, all of us are concerned with issues of security. We need to make sure we feel safe. We also, as human beings, like we like a degree of control, and there's a little bit of a dialogue around kind of shaming control or you shouldn't want control. But the truth is that there is a natural desire for a certain amount of control. Obviously, that can become pathological, in a certain way. But we're just talking about the natural, normal need for like, hey, I want to have some control of my surroundings and what feels safe. And Uranus kind of shakes that up and can be pretty disruptive to your nervous system, especially going into Gemini. So this is a really good time to be allowing yourself to be more expansive, to open to new ideas, and at the same time choose ways of, choose practices and ways to kind of manage yourself so that you can find ways to be grounded, because this is going to change all the things around you, and it's just really helpful to anchor yourself. So I just wanted to mention that point of view, and we'll talk more about that when we get into the individual impacts about how it could land on you.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you were saying that, I was remembering, what was it? Uranus entered Taurus 7, 8 years ago.
Mhm.
Do
And
you remember
20,
the year?
yeah, 2018.
2018. Okay. So I remember having conversations with you. We were probably making videos about it, but I remember talking about the change that was coming at that time and how it was impacting, really practical things, grounded things, Taurus things, women, money. And, look at how much those issues, the values, the all of the Taurus related things, the earth changes over these past years, the changes in, yeah, I mean, we lost our right to health care. Women
Yeah.
lost a lot during that time. Money has totally changed. So you kind
Yes.
of can look back and see all of those changes in those years and understanding that during this time, while Uranus is going to be in Gemini until when?
Until 2032 is when it first.
2032. I mean, it's got a break, and we'll talk about all of that. But
Yeah.
just thinking about what's going to change during that time, and that's all of the Gemini things. It's so much more mental ideas and
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah, and I think that's really good. I mean, you can really think of this Uranus switch as it's a departure from convention. So conventional thinking, because we're in Gemini, there's a departure from conventional thinking. You can also think of it as an acceleration of a different way of thinking. There's other things associated with Uranus, like space travel. It does have to do with the sky god. So astronomy, astrology are also pieces that tie in with this. So those are some of the things.
Disruption,
Yeah.
it's
Mhm.
there's a lot of disruptions going to happen
Yes.
in all of these areas.
Yeah, and I think on another level, part of what we're seeing too is that it is going into an air sign. So we're moving away from the materialism of Earth and the disruption of food systems and money and things like that. Not that those are going away; those have been changed. They are changed evermore, going forwards.
Right.
But a change in how we do technology. So I mean, you can't help but look at this and. You've got to look at AI. You've got to look at the you may call them advances, but I am not sure that they're advances in technology. Depends what you're looking at, really. Depends what you're looking at as who benefits and who suffers under such changes. So anyway, that I think, the move into Gemini really is stirring up those pieces. And Gemini is an unstable sign anyway. Gemini is a very changeable sign. It's mutable air. I like to think of Gemini as like that burst of wind that whips a piece of paper out of your hand and you're like, oh, I kind of needed that piece of paper, a receipt or something. And in Uranus, that is just taking it up to more like a tornado level of winds. I mean, we're really seeing wind whipping through and changing things. The image that just came to my mind is like if you go to the desert and you see those crazy spires poking up in the sky, those are formed by wind. Those are
Yeah.
wind whipping dust away and carving these things out. So I just wanted to give a little
Mm.
image of something that came to my mind with it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so
That's
those are some
interesting.
phrases for it.
Okay, do you want to open up the chart and we can take
Yeah,
a look at?
let's look at, so what the heck is going on when Uranus moves into Gemini?
Yeah, I mean, the thing we want to think about here too is that what we're looking at, Uranus is an outer planet, it's a generational planet, it is not a personal planet. So it really, the cycles of these outer planets are very focused on big picture ideas, things that impact all of us. And in looking at this, the connections between the outer planets really tell a story.
Mhm. Yes, they
Yeah.
do. There's a lot going
And
on there.
this, 2025, basically, with all of the outer planets and the mid-range planets as well, changing sign, there's just so much dynamic movement.
Hmm. Yeah, so in this chart here, you see Uranus, right away. It's at 0 Gemini. It's just going in there. And I think the biggest thing that Lori and I talked about when we first were like, let's make this video is the fact that there is a trine to Pluto. Now, this trine is not exact in this chart. We're not quite there yet, but you sure as heck can feel it brewing. But it
Mhm.
is going to be in place for several years, all the way through into 2028. So there's a real nice flow of energy between these two big outer planets. So,
A nice flow, a little bit of a frightening flow. I mean,
yeah,
we don't know, just
yeah.
because it's a trine does not mean it is that everything comes out of it is positive, which I have to confess, when I first saw that this trine was coming up, I was like, oh yeah, everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. That's
Plants.
my own idealism, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, really what a trine says is a flow of energy. And, flows of energy can be completely bowl you over. I mean, it basically talks about unimpeded flow. So on one hand, yes, you can see that as positive, in a society that values energy and proactivity and productivity. You're like, yes, unbridled energy. I can do whatever I want, but that taken too far, I mean, you can easily think there's a lot of consequences of taking that energy too far.
Yeah.
Unbridled flow of energy leads to things like, well, fascism, authoritarianism, like people, I mean, let's just be real. I mean,
Yeah,
so I do think there's a tendency in astrology for people to be like, oh, this is good and that's bad. And
right.
the truth of life is a lot more complicated than that. There's positives to this and there's negatives to this and there's stuff in between. I mean, this is shades of gray. But at any rate, this is a very dynamic connection between these two
Yes.
planets.
And one of the challenges to a trine is that we're not necessarily inclined to do any work to change it because it's just moving along.
Yeah.
And, a square aspect demands response. A trine aspect does not. And the fact that these are both in air, there's really not a human component in a lot of ways. That kind of uh, the detachment of Aquarius and, just the chatteriness of Gemini, there's not a lot of, yeah, humanity in it.
Yeah, I mean it's not warm and fuzzy. I mean, this is not a statement of connectivity. I mean, for that,
Right.
you're going to want to look to other places, particularly I think like Jupiter and Cancer and so on in this chart, and also the North Node in Pisces. That kind of brings in the more emotional components. But as far as this contact, well, let's talk about it a little bit in terms of the cycle. Does that
Yeah.
sound great? Okay,
Yeah.
so
That's
these
the interesting thing.
conjuncted. Yeah, and I think that, thinking about these in cycles helps you understand like where was the beginning,
Right.
where was the next story in the tail, and then where are we now? And the beginning point for this was the Pluto Uranus conjunction in Virgo in the 60s. I mean, it was really 1965, 66, 67, those dates in there, it was when it was really tight, but it really can be looked at for basically the entire period of the 60s. And think about the change in the 60s.
Yeah.
I was not alive, so I'm going to defer to you to talk a bit more about that particular
Well,
era.
it really is interesting. I mean, I was relatively young, but I was certainly aware of what was going on at that point in time. And if anyone who was alive during the mid 60s, look at your chart and see if you have planets between approximately, I always look for like between 14 and 18 degrees of Virgo, because that's where they were when they conjuncted in the 60s. And, people who were born in the mid 60s have this really strong statement of this combination of planets in their natal charts. And, if you just think about Uranus as the planet of revolution and sudden change and irrevocable change, and Pluto as the planet of destruction for the purpose of transformation, and bringing those two energies together. It was an incredibly powerful time. And even as a relatively young person, I'll tell you, it was like electricity in the air
Mm.
all through those years. It was palatable. It was very, very powerful sense. And so, yeah, that was the beginning of this huge cycle between Uranus and Pluto. And again, it's not a personal cycle. It's a very generational, it's a very, big idea kind of cycle that began then. And the square aspect that followed it, thinking about these always, like you think about the lunar phases. We have the same cycles that go on. When these two came together, a seed was planted. A seed in the collective mind, in the culture, was planted for the next phase where something has to be worked with. And that square between them happened in, I've got that date right here. I bet you have it quicker than I do. Um, yeah, that was 2014 and 15. And what do you remember about those years? All of the same issues that began in the 60s, the issues around civil rights for Black people, for women, for gay people, all of these things really were seeded in the 60s. And
Yeah.
then in that 2014-15, that was a really hard time. Oh, Vietnam too was the 60s. And then I think the Iraq War was there in 2014-15, and the school shootings were going on. Um, what else do you know about that? I don't,
Well, I was going to say, like, I think you've touched on, but you got to think about the conjunction as the seed state, and you
right.
use that term seed. That's great, and just yes, all of these emancipations, there's all of these movements that began.
Yeah.
Now, those movements didn't come out of thin air; they began from
Yeah.
decades and centuries of other pieces, and it was built on that. But that's what started. And so when we came to that square, I mean, the thing that I end up thinking about is the fact that in America we had a person of color who was president.
Yeah.
Barack
That's
Obama was
right.
president. That was, and this the symbol of that. I'm not saying it was a perfect presidency and there weren't other issues, whatever else. There's a lot of other parts of that conversation, but the symbolic nature of wow, a country that finally was able to make that a possibility. Now, that has ignited a whole cascade of effects, which is definitely part and parcel of where we are now. So I think of that square as being a crossroads, and it was 2012 through 2015. There was like there were seven different actual hit. It was a really dynamic period, and there was a lot of different things going on in that period. But right after that period, we then, from the American political perspective, not long after that, we had, Trump who got in after that. And I think that those things are related. There's a backlash. That's sort of one of my perspectives there. So I think it was a dynamic time, but also a time of like some anxiety, like people wondering, oh God, things look like they're going to change. I remember there being a lot of anxiety in the air about this anticipation. And then look at what's happened since that time.
Mm.
Since 2015, it's like we've been through a lot. We've had a pandemic. We're in this, there's a tipping of the world power right now. There is massive wealth that's really stepping into leadership roles. And,
Mm.
sometimes I feel like we're going back to like a feudal society. Just it's insane. So anyway, there's a lot happening in the cycles, and these are obviously these giant, these markers of different timing that are happening in our society. So, but here we are at the trine. We've moved away from that stress of the square. We're now in this time of like, I don't know, there's a little bit of feeling kind of bowled over by it. Um,
When I look at this pattern, in a natal chart, I always think about the square as, there's the seed moment, and then there's the square where a lot of work has to be done. And then if you did the right work, then you get the gift of it at the trine.
Yeah.
So I think in a lot of ways, the trine aspect really is, a report card of sorts. How did you do?
Yeah.
How did you
Yeah.
manage it?
And I think what comes to my mind with this too is like, okay, so you've got this, this unbridled channel of energy. Well, so the question becomes, for each of us as individuals, how do we channel this? How do we anchor ourselves so that we can manage the flow of energy? What kinds of things can we do on a personal level? How can this impact us? Because this also can be, I mean, I feel like I talked a little bit of maybe on the more negative side, but this also can be quite empowering as well. It just some of it depends on where you are in your life and so on. But this trine also really represents a real increase in your level of consciousness, a
Mhm.
heightened awareness of things way beyond maybe what you thought before. This brings in insights that you don't know where it came from, and you're like, oh my goodness, like this is really interesting. So this is a time to get really excited about new ideas. And we talk a lot about sort of like AI and all these things, but what's also mirroring that is changes in human consciousness, changes in how we look at healing. Sound healing, it has become something that is starting to be studied. There's a whole other echelon of, I would say, air related things that are also coming in here too. And I think that move away from materialistic science, the concrete, you have to be able to measure everything, and moving into this realm of air where we're not as concerned about measuring, but of ideas, that's also really exciting. I
Yeah,
mean, as well as it being, just as we talked about, anxiety producing,
right.
there's also this excitement of this new way of looking at these things, this new openness.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to kind of add that to this
The other
picture.
thing I want to add is look at your own chart. And if you have, I was just thinking, if you have planets in those first few degrees of Aries or Libra, you're going to get a hell of a powerful surge of energy. Think about it. If you've got planets in the first few degrees of Libra, you're going to be, that point is going to be trined by both of those planets at the same time. If you have planets in the first few degrees of Aries, you're going to get a sextile from both of them. Speaking of such, we do have a sextile going on with Neptune and Saturn. I don't know if we want to get really deep into talking about that or not.
Well, not, I mean, I think we really wanted to talk about that Pluto thing at sort of maybe slightly ad nauseum, but let's talk about the sextile briefly, because I think this is an important piece because this introduces fire into this picture of air, so it's like, what do you think of, with fire and air? Well, they work well together, right? They're complementary, and maybe a bit almost inflammatory, but you
Mhm.
really see this really nice little triangle there.
Mhm.
But a sextile is a little bit different than a trine in the sense that you have to work a bit harder to access what's available in the sextile. So I think that that's part of it. And to me, with Saturn and Neptune and Aries, there's a question around just how you handle your energy, how you handle your vitality, how you make decisions, what kind of actions do you take, are some of the things that on the personal level you need to consider in order to access the sextile. But yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, bringing in the stability of Saturn and kind of the mystical nature of Neptune can really be quite supportive here, for sure.
Yeah. And mean, I think this triangle together really makes a statement about this, that things need to be different. Things need to change. We're living in a time period where things are just absolutely have to change because we're dealing with a finite resource. We live on this planet and things have to change. And so this flow of energy together, to me, is sort of like, it's almost just like the flow of where the whole ship of everything's going. If all of life is on a boat together, an arc, if you will, then this is the flow that is guiding it. This is the flow that's saying, hey, this is the direction we need to move into. So I think that that's the first.
And,
I don't know.
in order to really work with the power and flow of that trine, we really need to engage the Saturn and Neptune, the stability, the spirituality. We have to engage those in order to not let that flow just be a powerful wind that
Yeah.
knocks everything over because they really ground it.
Yes, I mean Saturn, right, is the great stabilizer. I think, yeah, absolutely, Lori. Like just that's where it's like this is, really getting a handle on yourself and your what you believe, what your idealism, what you think is, when how you think about the collective. I mean, these are collective transpersonal planets. So on a personal level, they are demanding that we step beyond our own individual lives and start to see
Yeah,
ourselves as part of this much bigger
yeah,
picture, part of this
absolutely.
collective
And
fabric.
yeah, with Neptune, the thing to be cautious of is delusion, confusion, just giving up, surrender. Oh, I give up. And,
Yeah.
really, there's a lot to not give up about, I'd
Yeah.
say.
And it's easy, I think, with those two symbols together too, to be tempted to give up your agency and just believe in some sort of cult figure, or just believe let someone else have the power because it's too scary and it's too much work and I don't know and I'm just going to give over. So I think that that's when I think of the two together, the Saturn
Yeah,
Neptune, that's one of the what you just said about the lies, the deception, the delusions that can happen.
yeah.
It's like you have to, it's that fine line of like reality and stability, and then spirituality, and just like who we are as a collective, and working with those things together and not doing one
Mhm.
um at the cost of the other, so yeah. Okay.
There
Do
we
you want
have
to
it. Oh,
anything you
the
want
other thing that we want to cover is that Uranus is going to be in Gemini. You want to take advantage of this period of time to really get a handle on what it's bringing you. It's going to be in Gemini from July 7th to November 7th. And then it's going to have backtracked into Taurus, where it will be from November 7th to April 25th, 2026. And then it will be back on April 25th, 2026. It'll stay there until sometime in 2032.
nice, yeah.
And
So
the last time Uranus was in Gemini was in 1941 through 48. What was going on then?
geez, nothing, just the end of a massive world war, the middle and the end. Yeah, I mean, it really came in at a time of instability. But by the time it saw itself out, and it moved into Cancer in like 1948, 49, things were headed into a whole new place with, I don't know, I think of Cancer in the 50s, like the kind of a little bit squeaky clean mom vibe going on.
Oh God.
Um, so I'm glad you brought that up though, because it is true, and you may have heard this before, that Uranus and Gemini does have some associations with various wars in the past, and I think that's because Gemini is inherently unstable, an unstable sign. That's one of the symbols of it. So I do think that these times are times of restlessness. They are times of anxiety. They are times of things moving and changing into wholly new directions. So
With that trine to Pluto, we can see those bombs flying.
oh, yes. Yeah, we are living in tough times. So,
We are
okay.
living in tough times. We are. And we have to keep living.
Yes, and on that note, I think it's the perfect time to segue into doing the individual impacts, because you might be wondering by now, well, how the heck does all this affect me? And before we switch it, do bear in mind if you have planets at early mutable degrees. So let's just say somewhere around 0 degrees of Gemini, Pisces, Sagittarius, Virgo, you are particularly going to be impacted by this switch.
Yeah.
Those are things that might become more personal. So if you have things later along, you're going to want to look to the future and say, what's going to happen when Uranus comes to my X planet that is in the middle of a mutable sign or something
Yeah.
like that. So, okay. Anything else, Lori?
I think we're ready to move on.
Okay. Ta-da! Aries rising.
Okay, so for those of you who have Aries rising, this movement of Uranus into Gemini is bringing Uranus into your third house. Now, the third house is about, it's about our communication, how we communicate, how we use our voice. It's also about the people in our lives that we didn't really choose to be there. Our siblings, our neighbors, our cousins, these people that are just in our immediate environment with or without our permission to be there. So, and I think of that, I think of the connection as, it's those relationships. That's where we learn our communication skills. We don't learn how to communicate through our parents. We learn how to communicate through our siblings and our cousins and our neighbors. So I think that's sort of how those things are involved. That third house is also, yeah, the immediate environment. So look at your immediate environment. Look at those relationships that are close in your life and look at how you communicate and how you use your voice and understand that this is a place there's going to be a certain amount of disruption there. Maybe your relationship with a sibling that has been a certain way for many years, all of a sudden, there's a shift in your ability to use your voice authentically in that relationship, or yeah, whatever. There's big changes coming in that area. So think about it, prepare yourself for it, and see how it goes. Now, what about Pluto, Jenny? Where's that come in?
I was gonna say maybe you find out you had a twin you never knew about. That would totally be a Uranus in the third house thing. Well,
Yeah.
this is interesting because this whole Uranus conversation, it does play with this Pluto that is trining it. So Pluto for you, back in 2023, moved into Aquarius and moved into your 11th house. And at that time, it started initiating a catalytic change in your communities. It started initiating something new and different. Maybe you found yourself to be wholly, part of wholly new communities, or maybe you just needed to leave something that wasn't working for you. Or maybe you just weren't able to kind of receive the support of your community. And with Pluto in your 11th house, it's time to start waking up to your kind of membership in the community. So that really goes well with this Uranus moving into the way you use your voice. I mean, both the third and the 11th house have to do with the way you kind of socialize, your social intelligence, if you will, the way you learn from other people. So this is a learning kind of airspace that this trine is taking place in. Which I mean, that's kind of what we've been talking about anyway. Is like it's an air. So this is a way for you to really awaken to something new and different, not just in your community, but now adding to actually how you talk about it and who
Mhm.
comes with you to that community. And maybe, because the third house is transportation, how do you get yourself to that community? Maybe you've picked up a new habit of bike riding, or maybe you don't drive a car anymore and you ride a bus. I mean, these could also be things that might not sound like a big deal, but have a pretty big ripple effect into our personal lives.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so look for if you have planets in the early degrees of the mutable signs, you're going to be feeling this a lot. And also look to if you have personal planets in the early degrees of Libra or Aries, in which case you're going to be getting a big boost from this, right?
All right. Okay. Let's move on to Taurus rising. So for those of you with Taurus rising, Uranus is making the switch from your first house, which is nice, stable Taurus, or maybe it was once upon a time. Now it's moving into your second house. The second house, in a way, is an extension of the first house. Like in the first house, you're born, you're an infant, you're screaming, you're trying to get your needs met. In the second house, the infant starts realizing it has a body, and it starts realizing there's a tangible reality out there beyond just the needs. So when you think about it in terms of that, Uranus is waking you up to a new reality that has to do with this kind of secondary layer of the sense of self. So you can think of it as the place where you value yourself. You also, of course, can spread this out and start thinking about, what about your finances? What about your resources? How are those changing? Are there Are they expanding? Are they shrinking? I mean, we're living in an age where probably some people is expanding dramatically, a very few number of people, and other people it's shrinking. So just, just bear that in mind that there is a change coming into the second house, but depending on whatever's going on in your life is more going to tell you what the tale is about this. Like we're not going to be able to tell you the specifics. So think about your life and think about what is shifting in your value system. I mean, really, at the end of the day, this is a disruption to the value system. What you do with it is up to you. Now we also have Pluto on these charts, and I'm going to invite Laurie to follow up this conversation with Pluto.
Oh, thank you, Jenny. Yeah, so Pluto is relatively newly in your 10th house. So there's been big, big changes happening in terms of your career, your vocation, or your social life. There's been a big change happening there. Profound shift, really. So, what has that been? And that will really inform you in some ways as to how this shift in your second house is going. Let's say when Pluto started doing its little dance into your 10th house, into Aquarius, back as early as 2023, that you started a new job or a new way of being out in the world. Perhaps that is what is supporting this big change in your money, your finances, your self-worth. Perhaps you, yeah, got this great new job and all of a sudden you're making a lot more money. Perhaps you thought you had this great new job and then Doge came in and fired everybody, and all of a sudden you're going to have to learn that your self-worth is not as attached to your income as you thought. There's a connection between those two that's very relevant for you at this time.
Hmm. Yeah, it is helpful thinking about it as two areas of your life, right? Like just
Yeah,
kind of like how you bring in money and then like how you kind of deal with money. I mean, there's a relationship
yeah,
here.
yeah.
So yeah. Okay. Shall we move on?
Yes, let's move on.
Gemini
So,
rising.
so for those of you with Gemini rising, this is really personal because Uranus is stepping right into your first house, the most personal part of your chart. This is really designed to wake you up to who you are. With Gemini rising, you might kind of feel like you're whoever the person across from you wants you to be. That's a gift and a curse for people with Gemini rising. There's kind of the two faces that they can easily show. And with Uranus moving in there, it's like, okay, wake up to who you are, the ability that you have to change yourself, your personality, how you show up in the world. This is really very, very dynamic for you. People are going to see you very differently. And you're going to suddenly start being aware of that. Over the last 8 years, Uranus has been moving through your 12th house, and you've probably done a lot of inner work on allowing yourself to understand how even those deepest recesses of who you are susceptible to change, whether you like it or not. With Taurus in your 12th house, you want your unconscious to be this steady, stable thing. But you've learned over the last 8 years that things can change in that area as well. And now that understanding is allowing you or pushing you to change how you show up in the world. This is being supported by the next piece that I'm going to let Jenny talk about.
Yeah, so we have actually we made a video about Pluto going into Aquarius back in 2023, and that's what's happened here. Pluto is firmly in Aquarius now, and it's been in your ninth house. And the ninth house has a lot to do with the experiences that expand your mind. It has a lot to do with, do I need to pursue some different education, or do I need some sort of teacher, or or even like books, like what am I reading that is blowing my mind and opening up a whole new philosophy that I never thought about before. So really, when you take these two together, the first and the ninth house, we're just talking about an overhaul in your self-expression. An awakening to something new, some kind of new wild exploration about the sense of self that you hadn't considered before, and then it's sort of like, okay, how does my philosophy go on, go along with that? Or maybe like, what travels do I need to embark on in order to support this sudden understanding of who I am, where Uranus is in the first house. So this is really, I mean, in a nutshell, it's about that self-expression
Mm.
to them. So
Yeah.
that's a pretty exciting time for
Yeah.
Gemini rising. Yeah, we know people.
Yeah, we do know people. How is this going to
Yeah,
change the people in our lives? That's so
yeah,
interesting to think about, not just thinking about your own chart and how it impacts you, but how is, if your partner has this set up, how is this gigantic change to their very personality going to impact your relationship? Because it will.
yeah. And the remedy is space, giving people space. You got to give a lot of space with the air stuff like this.
Yeah,
There's a lot of
absolutely.
desire for liberation. So okay, an ant on me. Shall we move on?
Yes.
Yeah, like there's been a lot of ants in my house lately. Like, go away. Okay, Cancer rising. Oh dear. Okay.
Oh dear. Now
Oh
everyone
God.
with Cancer rising is
So,
worried.
so those of you with Cancer rising, this dynamic shift of Uranus is happening from your 11th to your 12th house. So Uranus has been in Taurus since 2018 and stirred up a lot of different things about your community and how you receive support from others. So just kind of take that into your consideration here. And now Uranus is moving into the 12th house, which is very much behind the scenes. This is a big awakening about your own patterns, your own subconscious patterns, your own unconscious, sub or unconscious patterns, basically. And this is a time that might feel kind of scary and you feel like, oh no, what's in there? Have a little bit of trepidation about that. But this is a time when that can really be stirred up and broken apart, and that some old stuff that maybe has held you back can finally be kind of jackhammered up and like released and let some new life in there. So I think that that's a big thing about this. Something that can really help when you have these, I don't know, big changes in the 12th house is really making sure you connect to nature, that you connect to the natural processes of what's happening out in the wild, because you're trying to uncover the wild in you. And so seeing the wild in wild places, I think, can serve as a really important mirror, and can be a very therapeutic time. So that, I think, is part of it. You can also think of the 12th house as being, well, in a nutshell, like imprisonment. So this is a time to unleash whatever's being imprisoned. So maybe that's ideas that no longer serve you, or false beliefs about your childhood or what have you. And it's really a time to just let some of those things be liberated. So maybe not particularly easy, maybe disconcerting, but ultimately potentially incredibly therapeutic and healing, especially as a Cancer rising person. So yes, and Lori, would you like to discuss that other symbol or other things about Uranus?
Yeah, well, I love what you just said about unleashing what's been imprisoned. I that really jumped out at me when you said that. It's just such a great way to think about this. To think about the 12th house itself is there's something that's been imprisoned in you that is now you're waking up to it and are will be able to really, yeah, let that go, release yourself from that. And it pairs so perfectly with Pluto having moved into your eighth house. Originally, Pluto began its movement into Aquarius in 2023. So this is something that you've been getting used to for a while. These are really slow moving planets. But this, with Pluto moving into your eighth house, you've been doing a deep dive into an understanding of how you navigate deep problems or deep issues with other people. It can be shared issues as well. So it's other people's baggage and the baggage you share with others. It can be around sexuality, it can be around money and resources. But there's some way in which you have been really trying to learn and develop a deeper understanding of how you navigate these places, how you set boundaries for yourself. And with this awakening in this hidden house, the 12th house, there's a connection there. You know, what you are waking up to, what you need to release from this inner unconscious prison is going to impact. um, there's an impact from where you're navigating other people. You know, if you're unleashing something that's been imprisoned in you, make no mistake, there are people in your life that you're going to have to navigate in a different way.
Yeah.
You know, as an example, if you're releasing some old childhood memories, then, you know, who are you going to have to navigate? You know, your siblings, your whatever. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to have opinions about this work that you're doing. And navigating those opinions is going to be part of allowing yourself to release that imprisonment.
Yeah. Yeah, I think these two together, it's like just a change in the way you handle intimacy, and all of what intimacy can mean on multiple levels with different people, not just a romantic partner. But I have this image in my mind with this of like, because they're air signs, of just it's like blowing out the psychic channels. It's like, and like blowing away the stuff that's blocking you and opening up your psyche to a new way of gathering knowledge. I that's kind of what is really coming to me as
If you
so
need a therapist, get one. If you need a good book to read,
got some
let us know.
recommendations.
We'll recommend something.
Okay. Let's move on to Leo rising.
Okay. So for those of you who have Leo rising, this big shift that's coming is bringing Uranus right into your 11th house. Now, before we even think about the 11th house, let's just consider that Uranus has been moving through your 10th house for the past 7 or 8 years here. So over this period of time, there's been a lot that has changed in your life around your career or your social reputation. A lot of what you may have wanted to be stable in that area has shifted and changed. And now the change moves into an intellectual area that is about the communities that support you. So you want to think about, what are the communities that support you? Um, the 11th house is an interesting house. It's not necessarily friends, but certainly there can be an overlap and it can be, certain groups of friendships, especially if your friends support you in a big way. I think about you, Jenny. You've got a big community of people that support you in, mountain biking and different things. So on that level, friends can be part of a community. But it's also, I always remember reading people talking about the 11th house like it's the PTA, and people today probably don't even know what the PTA is. But, groups and communities that may not be your friends, but are like-minded people that support you. So that's where the big change is coming. What is that area of your life look like right now? And what can you imagine? What do you want to really wake up and bring some really powerful new energy to support you? And what does that have to do with relationships, Jenny?
Right. Well, the other player here is we threw in Pluto because it has that trine for the next few years, really, several couple different years here, 3 years, to Uranus. So in your case, what that means is that Pluto has moved into your seventh house and it has initiated this change in the way you handle your one-on-one partnerships. It might have caused you to kind of evolve in the way you show up as a partner, or it maybe it's shown you like what that you want to just do something completely different with partnerships. Like you may not fit into the social model with Aquarius there. You may not, follow along the binary. There's a lot of different ways that could play out. And so with Pluto there, there's an evolution or transformation that has really been affecting you to do with this partnership idea. And that goes really well with this 11th house, because there's always that question, like if you have whatever your partnership situation is, it's always that question, do you bring a date to the party? Do you bring your do you try to get your partner to come with you to the martial arts class that you're all about and they're not quite sure, I mean, it brings that in, or are you all galvanized and joining these humanitarian causes and these groups, and because of that you meet this other person that's super passionate about those things, and then they become a partner, I mean, there's you can easily see the way these back and forth, and like if you have a friend group, does your partner come to the friend group, or are you like, see you later babe, I'm out of here for a week, like how do you handle that, how do you handle this connection? And with the trine, it's really suggesting that there's something to be there's some flow that can happen that hasn't happened before. There's an empowerment that can come. There's a new way of saying, hey, I'm going to just go for a little bit more liberation. It would feel more liberating to me to do, and then you fill in the blank. Is it more liberating to involve the partners? Is it more liberating to be more independent, and asking those questions of yourself and how it fits into the way you receive support. So something along those lines.
Yeah, and you can think of, Pluto going into the seventh house, I'm sure, can end a lot of relationships.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, it's going to transform a relationship, but you can see how Pluto moving into the seventh house could end a relationship that needed to end, or could begin a powerful, powerful relationship. And in either one of those cases, we all know, if we've ever ended a relationship, that throws the communities that we're involved in
Oh my
into
God,
a
yes.
big change, right?
Yeah.
Or if we suddenly have a new relationship, yeah, then all those questions of, am I going to be part of their community? Are they going to be part of my community? So that changes the relationship dynamics, change the community so much.
Yeah, I could list off a few examples, but I won't.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Let's move on to Virgo rising. So those of you with Virgo rising, well, this is an exciting time because there is this big shift of Uranus going into your 10th house. The 10th house, as I've said many times before, is the most public house. And it often is the place that represents our profession. It often represents, however we show up socially. So really our reputation, does your reputation precede you, And as a Virgo rising person, the way you think and the way you handle your mindset, it has very much to do with your profession. Perhaps you earn your living through teaching or writing, something where you're passing information. And having Uranus come into this 10th house means that you're about to go into a new direction. You're about to try something new and different that has to do with your career. Now, probably you're still going to be doing something to do with communicating, but it's going to be a different level. I mean, maybe it's a time that you're brought in a new technology, that you're embracing new technology in what you're doing. Or maybe it's a time when you're like, I'm going to teach something new and different. I've been doing it one way for a long time, and now it's time to do it in a different way. So I think that's pretty exciting. It also, of course, can be disruptive. It could be that you're in a profession and something like this, suddenly the job's gone. Poof. I mean, Uranus certainly can reflect that kind of thing. And
Doge.
so, right, I know, totally Doge. So the task here is to try to see what might be opening for you. What new thing can you step into? What can you embrace? Even if that change has been unpleasant, or even if it's exciting, you still need to have some kind of um, container to put it in. Like, what are you going to build if it's a professional thing? So anyway, that's the big shift. And Uranus has been in your ninth house for many years, since 2018, and in that, it really stirred up some different things. It stirred up the way that you kind of develop your philosophy, the way you think about society. It's possible that you could have encountered some legal issues in that time, or published a book. That would be another thing that could have happened. Can't think anyone that happened to, but I know. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking now and pass this off to Laurie.
So maybe with Uranus going into the 10th house, you could start a new YouTube channel.
Yeah, there you go.
Go in a different direction. Yeah, it's interesting. So when we bring Pluto into the conversation, we see that since 2023, there's been a powerful shift in how you function on the day-to-day routines of your life. There have been big changes there. And those big changes, or how you're viewing those big changes, what you're thinking about in that area is really supporting the changes in the career or the social reputation. How do you think of that, Jenny? I mean, because this is mine, I'm thinking, what exactly? Pluto going into my sixth house definitely, was a health issue thing for me as far as my knee replacement. And it definitely put me in a position. The changes in the day to day have certainly put me in a position of giving me a lot more time and attention
Mm-hmm.
to develop the new view of the world, the ninth house, which has prepared me for the changes coming in the career space. I guess it's really as simple as that. So, for those of you with Virgo rising, there's some story that matches up in that
I was
way.
just thinking too, like Pluto moving into your sixth house could be a brush with mortality, and Pluto's sort of like, look, this shit doesn't last forever. So I think Pluto moving into the sixth house can also be like, what do I want to do with my time? What shift do I want to make in my public reputation, or in my professional work that is now's the time? What have I learned from perhaps that brush with mortality? Anyone who's undergone a surgery, it's like you are knocked out. You're put into another realm for a while. So, it kind of there's an educational component to that too of like, what do I want to do? Because it does the sixth house also can have to do with employment. So it's very likely that this is something that affected routines and maybe health that now is going to affect the way you do the employment piece too. So I think there's something about that connection. The sixth and the 10th house are definitely concerned with your kind of material existence, the sixth of routines and 10th being profession. So there's a nice flow going on here. I think there's a back and forth. It might also be that whatever changes you make in the way you conduct your professional work is going to change your routines. It's going to alter what your daily life looks like too. So this is a back and forth flow. That's so think about all those things.
And also, remember, Uranus wants freedom.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
one of the things is if you've been working like a crazy person every minute of every day, you might be sick of it.
totally.
You might want some freedom.
Yeah. Oh, and if you're younger, like if you're a teenager, this is like, get me the hell out of my house.
Right.
I want to be away from my parents. I mean, this the 10th house can have to do with parents too. So any sort of authority, you're right, Lori. Thanks for bringing that up because any sort of authority is like, okay, I want to break that. I want to get away from that.
Yeah,
So
Uranus
that thing,
always brings these ideas
yeah,
of freedom, freedom. And, as we're talking, because this one is mine, I'm thinking back to the whole cycle, and I could go on and on and on. And anyone who's listening to this, if they really want to explore the cycles of these things and see how life has led them from point A to point B to point C to here,
yeah.
there's a lot of information that you can get as you track these whole cycles. So reach out and we'll walk you through it.
I know just one. I'll tell you a ton. So anyway, okay. Well, let's should we talk about Libra?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay.
So, for those of you with Libra rising, this big awakening, this big need for freedom and change is happening in your ninth house. So, for the past 7 or 8 years, Uranus has been moving through your eighth house. There's been a lot of upheaval and disruption over those years in your ability and how you navigate the deeper levels of relationship, how you manage your own boundaries in relationships, some of those really deep issues that you have to deal with in relationship. So that piece is done. You've done the work there. And now Uranus steps into the ninth house, and your attention is brought to your worldview. What do you need to learn? What travel do you need? Where do you need to expand in a big, unexpected way your understanding of the world. That ninth house really speaks to all the experiences of our lives that from which we develop our worldview, our bigger perspective and understanding of the world. So, that can include travel and education and even religion and politics, all of these big things that create our worldview. So over the next year, the coming years, you're going to really wake up to a new view. And whether that comes through education or travel or something else, really prepare yourself for something very unexpected here. If you
Mm.
suddenly find yourself wanting to study astrology, don't be surprised. Or if you're already in the middle of it, that will expand. I always connect Uranus in some ways with astrology, and Uranus going into the ninth house is a time when a lot of people start that study or really get serious about it as well. So Pluto is activated here also. And what do you think Pluto is adding to this storyline, Jenny?
Well, I mean, Pluto's really adding something that's changed about your creative self-expression. Now, there's different ways to interpret that. One meaning could be maybe you recently had children in the last couple of years. Maybe you have a baby at this point, or maybe something has shifted with a child in your life, even an adult child. So that would be one way to think about Pluto moving into the fifth. But essentially, the fifth refers to the how you give of yourself. How you give love, those exciting, fun things that you do because they give you pleasure, not because you're trying to gain some sort of other benefit from it. You just do it because you love it. So that's what the fifth house brings. So with Pluto here, something has changed. There's something new in your life. There's something transformative in your life. I also like to think about the fifth house as it is like recreational pursuits. I think about, mountain biking, rock climbing, like those things that bring a thrill. Those are also part of the fifth house, like those kind of sporty spice things, So in any case, there's a change that Pluto has brought in this fifth house, and it works really well with that ninth house because they really both have to do with you and the way you express yourself. And the fifth is the creative self-expression, and the ninth is more like the experiences that you gather that end up forming the philosophy that you kind of live your life by. So they really kind of, they work well. I mean, this is a trine, so these are two areas of your life that want to cooperate. They want to work well together. So just for some examples, for example, if you did indeed have a baby, I have a friend of mine who had a baby in the last couple of years in timing with this, and they've been a little not sure what to do with their work life. So with Uranus going to the ninth house, it might be time to like figure out whatever that next work piece is that you can do while still taking care of your child. But that's exciting to you and opening your mind in any way. You might need to enroll in some night classes or something like that. So that's just one example, but you get the gist. I mean, the idea is that there's something stirring about how you want to create. And, Uranus is saying, well, go get the next level, find the teacher, go read the book, read the manual, do the work to take that, whatever that love of something you have to another level.
Go on a
So,
trip, take the baby,
yes,
strap the baby on your back, and go on a long trip,
I'll do the Iditarod and all
or
that stuff.
enter politics.
Yeah. I know, and of course, the fifth house doesn't have to do with babies. I just want to make sure you realize that. I mean, I don't have children, so just it doesn't have to. But you can think about it as those like that love that you just want to pour out into something.
Into something. Yeah, it could be yeah, it could be many things.
It'd be a cat clawing my chair right now. All right, shall we move on?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, so Scorpio rising. Those of you with Scorpio rising, Uranus is leaving the area of your partnerships. So for the last 8 years, it's been in Taurus. Or 7 or 8 years, it's been in your seventh house of partnership. You may have experienced some change in the way you handle your partnerships. There may be a breakup or a new relationship that has started sometime in those last 7 years. And now Uranus is, guess what, moving into the eighth house. The eighth house, when you think about the seventh and the eighth together, is the place where things start getting deeper. Things start taking a turn where you're like, oh, I didn't realize they have that baggage, or you start kind of bumping into the places where you're in this relationship now and you need to figure out how to share resources. You need to figure out how to deal with money together. You need to share space together, so you get the idea of what the eighth house can partly be about. It's this new level of intimacy that can be uncomfortable, difficult, challenging, but also incredibly rewarding when you break through it. So having Uranus go in here is sort of saying, all right, now you need to wake up to something new and different in the way you handle these partnerships. Now let's remember, this could be business partnerships as well. This could be any other one-on-one connections that you in general are waking up to some new way that you need to have some different boundaries in your life. Maybe you need to kind of start identifying the folks in your life that kind of make you feel drained, especially, or anxious would be a good keyword with Gemini there. Start identifying those pieces too, and kind of what change do I need to make? Where do I need to set a different set of boundaries here? Is that going to make things feel healthier and better and more balanced? So those are some of the things that come to my mind with the eighth house. Might not be the easiest. It's going to stir up some subterranean stuff that you're kind of like, oh, great. Wasn't I wasn't ready for that. It could stir up some stuff about money. Um, yeah, I think, but anyway, I think you get the gist. I'm gonna pass up to Lori here because it'd be great to hear what you think, Lori, about also Pluto being in the fourth house at the same time.
Yeah, it's such an interesting combination, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
Pluto has been in that fourth house for a few years now, really changing the bedrock of your life, really changing your home and family. Some major changes have probably been bubbling up in that area of your home and family. So there's a connection here where, I think of different ideas, and clearly everyone's story is different. But if you can think about what storyline kind of attaches to this big change in your family that is now suddenly resulting in an awareness of these different kind of boundaries you have to set, or you want freedom from sharing resources with somebody else. Possibly one of your parents died, and all of a sudden you and your siblings are having to figure out the will, share resources, and you just want to friggin' run away. That's that freedom seeking of Uranus. But there's a big change in how you navigate these things. So, you may have never had to navigate deep, deep issues with certain people that suddenly you have to because of some big change happening in the root core of your family, whether that be your family of origin, your family you're living with now, the land, maybe there was a fire on your property, and all of a sudden there's these different navigations that have to happen. Or maybe it's some awareness that has come about your ancestry that all of a sudden you have to deal with these deep, deep levels of connections with other people's baggage and other people's ideas. That's a deep one.
Yeah, and I was thinking, the key phrase that's kind of coming up for me with this one is this is a time to release entanglements. You're a Scorpio rising, the tendency to entangle is high, but you've got air signs in these psychic type houses, these deep houses. So it's time to kind of, recognize where are the over entanglements that you can step back from. So rather than cutting everything off and running away, like Lori said, it's retracting where you have maybe over invested emotionally in an unhealthy way. I think that's really what the question is about here at this deep level.
It's
So
a deep one. This one's really interesting.
yeah. All right, let's
All
carry
right,
on.
let's carry on. Let's go to Sagittarius rising. So for those of you with Sagittarius rising, Uranus is stepping into your seventh house. Expect the unexpected in terms of your relationship, your partnerships, whether that be your, marital, spousal relationship, your business partners. I think of the seventh house as contractual relationships. So, it could be your therapist, it could be your astrologer, it could be your spouse, it could be your business partner. but there's going to be big changes in that area. And, those changes can come in a number of different ways. It can be your own understanding of what you need in a partnership that changes. It could be something radical that changes in the partner themselves. So you have to meet that in a new and different way. For the last 7 or 8 years, Uranus has been moving through your sixth house. There's been a lot of changes that have occurred in your day-to-day routines. And if this partnership is part of your day-to-day routines, a business partner or a spousal partner, then you've already, gone through a lot of changes that impact the relationship. But this stepping into the seventh house really brings it onto the level of the partnership itself and how those changes are now going to impact the connection. This could be a time of incredible upheaval. It could also be a time of incredible excitement. So, you want to look at both sides of that coin. You also, with Uranus, you might really need more freedom in your partnership. Your partner might need more freedom in the partnership. So, really preparing for this, you want to be careful because you don't want to try to hold on too tight, or the disruption will tend to shatter things. Did I go too negative there?
No,
It
uh,
can bring excitement. And if you prepare for these things and see these things coming, sometimes you can give a planet a job to do. I often think about that. It's like, okay, Uranus moving into my seventh house. Let's give it a job so that it doesn't destroy my primary partnership that I really don't want to destroy. So,
yeah.
how would you do that? Well, find something exciting to bring into the relationship, or find a super exciting best friend that's not going to disrupt the partnership.
Hmm. You telling people to get a third wheel, Lori?
Something like that. I was thinking more friendship, but whatever it takes.
Yeah, well, actually, I mean, it's interesting thinking about that, because the other thing we have on here is Pluto, and Pluto has gone into your third house as a Sagittarius rising person. This happened in 2023, so you've been already dealing with this and processing this and handling this. And really, what this is a statement about is making a big transformation, or something has really shifted in the way that you either handle siblings, the way that you deal with like your locale, like your neighborhood and all the resources around you in your neighborhood. Or it might simply be that you feel empowered to use your voice in a new way that to date you haven't been able to until now. So there's something emerging here in your third house about the way you move through the world, the way you use your voice to move through the world. And again, as I mentioned, it can have to do with neighbors and siblings. But that's kind of, what's happening in the third house. And it has to do with this partnership. Um, I was thinking the other thing with the third house is it is a place of learning. So there might be some new awakenings that you've come to understand about some deeper dynamics that you were previously unaware of, that have to do with, your upbringing, or, the way that you fail to ask for what you need, or need to learn how to ask for what you need, or maybe you ask for it too strongly. There's some dance around that in the third house. And you can see easily how that's going to work with the seventh house. I mean, the way you communicate is so important to relationships. And then you're a person with Gemini in the seventh house too. I mean, communication is so, so, so key for all of your relationships. So I think during this time to handle this flow of energy, this is a time to really get clear, set aside time to communicate, make sure that you make tons of space for communication, that you consciously, intentionally set it up and say, let's have a conversation. And then you give that conversation space. You give your partner space. You give yourself space. I mean, I think there is a huge re-examination that's going to happen here. But that doesn't mean that you have to blow everything up in your life. It just means that you need to mentally re-examine and ask yourself where there might be places that you could just give it some more room, give it a little more breathing room. And I think that could really go a long way into how you use your voice, calmly, clearly, not having to be cutting, and find a bit more balance in your partnerships. So Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. Cool. Carrying on then to Capricorn rising. So if you have Capricorn rising, then this Uranus change is happening in your sixth house. You know, Uranus has been cruising through your fifth house since 2018 in Taurus, kind of disrupting the way you give of yourself, kind of shaking you up to a new way of, ooh, I'm didn't think I was creative, and now I know I'm super creative. There's some sort of stirring up that's been happening since that time. And now, when Uranus moves from the fifth to the sixth house, this is somewhat of a statement of like, whatever that new learning you learned about yourself as a creative being is now demanding that it be incorporated in a new way into your daily life and into your routines. And that might feel really disruptive. I mean, maybe you had a stable job and you decided to quit the job and become an artist. And now, when Uranus moves into the sixth house, this is the time when you're really going, oh, this has a ripple effect. This has a ripple effect on my routines. This has a ripple effect on my mental health. You know, my ability to either be super excited or to be anxious. You know, so having Uranus kind of go in here is really a symbol for, you know what, all your routines are about to go out the window. And it's funny because I always think of friends. You know, I have a friend in mind for this one. And I'm like, yep, this person just needed to pull the plug on a bunch of different things, and so they're already experiencing this like churning of, oh wow, wholly new routines.
Yeah.
Again, it doesn't have to be like, oh my god, it's really scary or like something bad with my health necessarily, but just be aware that your routines are going to probably get turned upside down. It's probably going to be for some reason you never even thought of. And what this gives you a great opportunity to do is to really address imbalances in the way that you are handling this part of your life. Like, you know, scrutinize your all your routines, your habits, how you eat, scrutinize your diet, check in about your exercise. Are you getting enough? Check in about your social connections. Are you able to talk to people when things are stressful? Are you able to release stress positively? So that's what I think what a big question is being asked here as Uranus moves into this. And this could be super exciting. I mean, maybe you move to a new continent, you know, and if your routines are, you know, upside down and inside out because you live in Australia now or something. So again, it's walking that tricky line of
Yeah.
between anxiety
And
and
and that's really, yeah, I with and we don't have Saturn on here, but with Saturn having just moved into your fourth house, part of that change of routine very well could be around a move or a change at home or in your family. But we've added Pluto, and we're kind of thinking about Pluto's impact here as well. And I like it, you know, as you're talking about all these changes in the day-to-day routine. And I'm looking at Pluto over there in the second house. Okay, so Pluto moved into your second house, into Aquarius in 2023. So there's been a lot of deep, intense change in that area. And it could come in several different ways. Possibly you've suddenly come into resources that you didn't have previously that are enabling you now to make these radical changes in your day-to-day life. On the other hand, perhaps you've lost all your resources that you thought were so important to you, and yet the lack of that responsibility is enabling you to wake up and find a new way of being day to day. You know, ultimately, Pluto in your second house is going to teach you how to deepen your self-worth, your value for yourself, whether it's through major resources or major lack of resources. You know, in this country, we think we need so much more than we need. And I, you know, more and more, I'm thinking about that. The power of not being tied in to needing everything and how that frees us up.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, there is a liberation component here, you know, like that's we've talked about that a lot, but agreed, you know, like how do you what is your relationship to resource? And I love what you just said, Lori. Like just yes, like really evaluating that, like questioning, do I need this thing? Do I need that thing? Like how much money is enough? What do I really need to get by? You know, like to and to feel to have that sense of liberation in the daily, you know. Good question. Okay, carry on to Aquarius rising.
Okay, so for those of you with Aquarius rising, this big shift. Oh my goodness, this is a fun one, I think. I like this. This big shift, this big liberation, this big expect the unexpected is occurring in your fifth house. So the fifth house is about where we have fun, where we play. It's where we give of ourselves with joy and exuberance. So for the past 7 or 8 years, Uranus has been moving through your fourth house. There have probably been a lot of changes to your family dynamics, to your home, possibly to where you live. So, you've been going through a lot of changes there, even though that's an area that you really like to have stable. And at this point, maybe you can return to some stability there. But now that that job is kind of done, Uranus steps into your fifth house and it's asking you, okay, where are you going to find excitement in giving of yourself? Where are you going to find excitement and liberation through your creativity, through giving of yourself? It might be a time where, you have a child or you start a new creative project or you fall in love. I always tell people, when I see a planet like Jupiter or Uranus moving into the 10th house, I always tell people, if they're of childbearing age and are in a relationship with a person of the opposite gender, of the opposite sex, I always tell them, if you don't want children, be careful because Uranus is expect the unexpected. If you don't want children, be careful. If and find another way to express that energy. As I like to think about giving the planet a job. Uranus going into the fifth house. What can you wake up to in terms of your most authentic creativity? Maybe you've always wanted to be an artist of some sort, but you've, felt really shy about that. Well, now's the time, and this brings us a perfect segue into what's Pluto doing to support this?
Yeah, so Pluto with Aquarius rising, well, it's in your first house. It's somewhere in there, with full sign houses, and it's stirring things up. It's changing your view of yourself. It's altering your self awareness. Maybe becoming aware of something wholly new and different about who you are. Maybe you've recognized some sort of evolutionary purpose that you feel, because I mean, Aquarius is a collective sign. So you might have an understanding of this feeling of like what your work is, your thread in the tapestry of the collective. Are you weaving like a new understanding of what that is? And Pluto's very catalytic. So it could be altering your life direction. It could be, waking you up to a new way of really harnessing that Aquarian rising sign. I mean, you can think of it as like a beacon, the sign you're moving towards, this humanitarian, quirky, out of the box type of energy. So with Pluto, Pluto's really just changing your relationship to yourself. And then now you throw, Uranus in your fifth house and how you create yourself, and kindling your enthusiasm for, freeing your creative spirit. I mean, there's a real emancipatory feel to this one because again, the first and the fifth house very much have to do with the self and the self-expression. So this is both a personal experience of this big dynamic outer planet connection, but also just a very exciting one about how you choose to express yourself. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So,
Yeah, it's exciting.
yeah. Okay, let's carry on then to Pisces rising. So those of you with Pisces rising, Uranus is entering your fourth house on July 7th. And Uranus has been in Taurus since 2018. So during that period of time until now, it's been stirring up the way you communicate. It's been altering perhaps a relationship with a sibling or altering, where you are in your neighborhood, like your connection with your local community. So that's where it was. And then so now moving into the fourth house, it's bringing its game changing energy to your home life, to, the family that you live with, to the building that you live in, to the way you feel connected or don't feel connected to the land it's built on. You also can think about maybe some kind of crazy awakening about your lineage, something you never knew comes to light, and you're like, oh, well, that really changes things. That changes my foundation. That changes, my ability to look at, old childhood patterns and how they kind of still hold me. So I think about Uranus going to the fourth house is maybe disruptive because nobody likes their emotional security, disrupted, but also illuminating and enlightening and allowing you to let go of stuff that keeps you tethered, like stuff that does not serve. So I think in the Gemini here gives you this ability to kind of look at it and examine it like with a bit more objectivity because it's an air sign. So take this time to do that, to observe that, to ask what's changing, to look at it, and to kind of weigh it. And this really does go with the other piece of this story, which is where Pluto is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's really very interesting having Uranus move into the fourth house and the whole idea of expect the unexpected. At the end of this transit, you very well might not be living where you're living now. And you might already have plans to be moving or some major shift in the family dynamics. So with Pluto having entered your 12th house by whole sign houses, in 2023, there's been a lot bubbling up in really understanding yourself in a deep underground level. Getting to know your unconscious patterns of behavior or possibly opening up to a spiritual connection. But I feel like this is more of a psychological thing with Pluto doing that deep dive there. It's some way in which you are learning to understand something about yourself and your unconscious patterns. And that is really supporting this sudden change, whether it's anxiety or excitement, this sudden change in the home and family dynamic is directly connected to that deep dive you're doing into your own unconscious.
Mhm. Now, something about this one to me that is saying, you are capable of way more than you thought. It's really kind of unlocking these hidden powers that you may not have seen, and
Mm.
they are coming to light at this time, and that you may really surprise yourself of the resources you have, the way you show up for your family, the way you show up to do your therapeutic work. I mean, there's something emerging, and especially like I feel like Pisces rising people may easily get overlooked. Like, oh, you're so sweet, you're like kind of being gentle and demure, and bullshit. You got these planets lighting up these other places and really showing you who you are. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, people with Pisces rising can really surprise other people. I
Yeah.
was working with a client just recently who had Pisces rising, but the whole chart was all fire. I mean, I exaggerate. It wasn't all fire, but it was mostly fire. And it's like, oh boy, people are surprised when they get under the surface and really understand who they're dealing with.
Okay, I think that we'll put that away and
All
say thank you
right.
very much to everybody, and thank you, Lori.
Well, this was fun and thank you. And Jenny, you're going to be away for a while, and I hope you have a wonderful trip. And we will resume videos on the other side.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.